do that. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, executive, and good morning to those joining us in the digital gallery this morning. We are just working through a couple of technical issues to ensure connectivity this morning, but and also just for some members to join us in the physical gallery this morning. Good morning. Good morning. So it is once again my privilege this morning to declare the special meeting of Monday 11th of July open, and in doing so I would once again pause and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and across which our region is formed, and congratulate and recognise their elders past and present, and those developing for their continued nurture of culture in celebration of this great place. Councillors, I note that we don't have a full attendance this morning, and with your forbearance I'll go through. Firstly, Councillor McGuinness, for health reasons, is not able to join us physically but is with us via dial-in, and Councillor Swamborough is a late notification that on health basis he's not able to join us this morning, including remotely, and has been granted emergency leave of absence for that situation, and offers his apologies for today's meetings. I note a full attendance of the executive team and the attendance of all other councillors accordingly. I move to any declarations of interest for today's meeting. Not aware of any and not advised of any. I don't believe there's likely to be any. We move to item 5, which is consideration of the business of the meeting. And councillor, before we proceed, councillors, I would like to introduce a motion in 3 parts that, in accordance with Council's meetings and other forums procedure, Council firstly remain in open session in considering Council's adoption of the 2022-2023 budget, and second, make publicly available via the link on Council's website the confidential agenda of the special meeting Monday 11th of July 2022, and thirdly, that Council will publish the new initiatives contained in the 2022-2023 budget, along with the projected costings where such release is consistent with commercial and confidence considerations. I move. I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, thank you. I don't believe this needs further discussion, so councillors, I don't intend to speak further. Anyone wishing to speak? Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
In favour.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously. That allows us then to move all those items so they're publicly available. And councillor, in keeping with our past tradition for a budget special meeting, I'll now proceed to the lectern and introduce the proposed budget for this year. We all hope that technology works for us all for today. Good morning, councillors, executive and members of the public and media who are joining us today, either in person or online from our digital gallery. On behalf of my councillor colleagues, it's my pleasure to introduce the proposed Scenic 2022-2023 budget today for adoption by council. Prepared by all councillors for our communities across the Scenic Rim, this year's budget has been framed in the context of a number of challenges faced by our region. Infrastructure recovery following the impacts to our road network as a result of severe flooding earlier this year, significant movements in materials and services prices in a high inflation environment, and the ongoing effects of COVID-19 on our workforce, as well as our suppliers, all of which continue to impact our day-to-day operations. Despite these challenges, our focus has continued to be on ensuring a strong future for the Scenic Rim and continuing to meet the needs of our communities. Our budget deliberations have been meticulous in considering how we can best serve our region and ensure the best value for our ratepayers. I'd like to offer my thanks to my councillor colleagues for their diligence throughout the budget deliberations, and also to the Chief Executive Officer, John Gibbons, and to council employees for their dedication to the budget process that has contributed to the preparation of our 2022-2023 budget. We're proposing a total expenditure of $103.2 million, which would be an increase of just $1.3 million, bringing us back into line with our long-term forecast. As in previous years, we've continued to rise to the challenge of balancing the aspirations of our community, articulated in the shared vision of the Community Plan 2011 to 2026, while maintaining our $1 billion of assets and ensuring we meet our legislative requirements and maintain financial sustainability for the long term. We've also wrestled with the demand for ongoing capital investment to upgrade current assets and to meet the anticipated growth of our region. In this budget, we have also considered the constraints of the marketplace and recognised the likely 2-year program of reconstruction activity we will need to progress as a result of the most recent natural disaster events. Councillors, this is a fiscally responsible budget reflecting the benefits of robust planning and analysis, clarity of prioritisation through strategic focus, and commitment to sustainable service delivery and good governance. Revenue. The most recent property valuations determined by the Queensland Government's Valuer General have caused widespread debate as the overall regional land valuation has increased by 24.9%. As with prior valuations, this has also seen significant variability of valuation outcomes for individual properties. Our rural landowners saw their property valuations increasing by an average 33.2%, while non-rural properties increased in value by 18.42%. It is important to recognise that Scenic Rim ratepayers will not automatically face major increases in their rates as a result of these valuation changes. Council understands such fears of increased rates in line with increased valuations, as rising cost and living pressures are now impacting so many aspects of daily life. Council has applied a number of treatments in this budget to mitigate impacts of extreme property valuation changes to achieve balanced contributions to the revenue needs for the region. As with prior years, the variability and in some cases significant changes in these new valuations were relevant considerations as we progressed our deliberations. We have determined a simple suite of revenue tools to balance the reasonable contribution for each rateable property while adhering to the principle of valuation-based variable contribution. I can confirm that Council intends to continue to use a 2-year average of property valuations to mitigating the resulting effects for individual rates contributions across the Scenic Rim. We also intend to continue to maintain capping on increases at 9% of general rates to mitigate major changes for individual contexts. Our proposed budget also includes a further step to increase the value contribution via the community infrastructure charge. As you're aware, councillors, revenue collected via this charge is applied specifically to sustaining our road and bridge network in accordance with our asset management plans. This year, that charge is proposed to sit at $500 per rateable property. Adjusting this component to increase contribution allows us to significantly reduce the rate in the dollar that we are applicable to most categories, while generating the overall revenue required to serve our communities. For residential principal place of residence properties, the rate in the dollar would reduce from 0.7013 cents to 0.6392 cents of recognised valuation. Inclusive of the increase in the community infrastructure charge, The combined new minimum rate and community infrastructure charge for this category would be $1,604.85 with the application of the early payment discount, representing a 4% increase overall. This would be an increase of $1.22 a week, that is $63.45 annually. Similarly, with discounts for early payment, ratepayers with a rural principal place of residence would experience an increase of $1.31 a week or $68.20 annually. The combined new minimum rate and community infrastructure charge for a rural principal place of residence would be $1,725.50 after discount. These figures include the community infrastructure charge, as I said, which helps fund Council's capital works program for the delivery of roads and bridges. In 2022-23, this proposed increase would be $53 from $447 to $500, as we wish to prioritise funding towards maintaining our extensive network of roads and bridges in line with community expectations. The bottom line, we believe that these rates increases for average properties are a relatively modest price to pay to enable Council to continue to provide a high level of service to the community. Other government revenue. As a dispersed regional council with a relatively small ratepayer base compared to other local governments, we rely on external funding sources to enable us to deliver key projects for our community while reducing the impact on our general revenue. We are grateful for the co-investment from both the Queensland and Australian governments, who collectively would contribute $20.1 million towards both operational and capital projects in 2022-23. We look forward to continuing to achieve a high level of success in securing funding through additional Queensland and Australian government grant programs in the year ahead. We have a strong track record in presenting robust and well-considered grant applications for projects and programs that deliver community outcomes in line with our corporate plan, Scenic 2026, and state and federal government priorities. As an example, from prior year, the Empower Her hiking program was just one of our success stories in 2021-22, funding of $100,000 from the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport to encourage women and girls to explore the spectacular scenic rim and the sport of hiking, delivered 75 guided hikes from February to June. More than 800 tickets were sold, more than 80% before the program commenced. And as well as encouraging women's participation in outdoor activity, the initiative brought many visitors to our region, delivering both social and economic benefits for the scenic rim. Looking at capital. This year we are proposing a $34 million investment to our capital program. As I mentioned earlier, infrastructure recovery will be a key focus for the year ahead, following the recent severe weather events which have impacted our road and bridge network. However, we will also continue our program of ongoing base level maintenance of our infrastructure assets, recognising that roads and bridges are key drivers of our regional economy. In 2022-23, we are proposing an allocation of $31.54 million to the Scenic Rim's roads and bridges, representing an ongoing investment in a well-maintained, safe and interconnected transport network, which will include allocations from this money to the maintenance, upgrade and repairs to roads and bridges and capital expenditure on roads. A multi-million-dollar investment in Kerry Road south of Beaudesert will continue to be rolled out, as well as Verisdale Scrub Road at Gleneagle. Council is proposing a total investment of $3.1 million towards improvements to 3 bridges across our region this year, those being Hinchcliffe Bridge at Corralbin, Kengoon Bridge at Kelbar and Freeman Bridge at Verisdale Scrub. More than $9 million in financial contributions from the Australian and Queensland governments will help us to achieve maximum value for our region and reduce the burden on ratepayers. I acknowledge the contributions through the Roads to Recovery program, Transport Infrastructure Development Scheme, the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure program, Bridge Renewal program and the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity program. Our commitment to maintaining the region's stormwater infrastructure is underpinned by a proposed investment nearing $1 million for drainage improvements in 2022-23. two of which are major drainage projects identified for delivery at Kelbar and Bow Desert to alleviate historical issues, as well as some works in Boona and more minor works across the region. Our investment in footpaths in the coming year recognises their importance in creating connected communities and encouraging a healthier and more active lifestyle. Footpath works will see a proposed allocation of $1.12 million in this year's budget for two projects in Boona and Tamborine Mountain. Looking to the future, and with the aim of reducing construction costs, we also have a proposed allocation set aside to investigate and trial the use of alternative footpath materials and construction methods. Across the region, Council maintains 129 parks covering 426 hectares of land. We know from the results of our recent customer satisfaction survey that our parks, and particularly their accessibility, are held in high regard by Scenic residents. In the year ahead, we are proposing an investment of more than $4 million in capital expenditure for the landscape maintenance of our parks and gardens, which are at the heart of our Scenic communities. To fees and charges. In line with our commitment to minimising the financial burden on ratepayers, cost recovery continues to be a focus of Council in its levying of fees and charges. Ranging from animal management to waste services, our fees and charges for 2022-23, announced in early June, are forecast to contribute $6.269 million towards Council's revenue for the coming year. Modest increases in fees and charges, with a focus on user pays, will continue to support the delivery of services to our communities. This year's budget includes modest increases in both residential and commercial waste charges. We're proposing a $36 increase, which would bring the annual fee to $442 per year for normal domestic wheelie bin services, and domestic users who do not have a bin collection service would see their waste disposal fee increase by $13 to $164 annually. These increases would allow us to expand and increase the level of services we provide to the community, supporting increased recovery of resources and reducing the amount of waste disposed of to landfill. Our waste fees and charges reflect the increase in service levels geared towards waste reduction and increasing the recovery of resources by capturing the valuable recycling materials within waste. While the Queensland Government will continue to rebate the full cost of the waste levy applicable to domestic curbside waste collection until June 2023, this will begin to reduce from the 2023-24 financial year onwards. Just as domestic waste charges have risen, the proposed fees applicable for commercial operators for curbside collection have also increased. This would be an increase of $56 to $667 a year for a commercial curbside wheelie bin, reflecting Council's increased costs of providing this service, as we have no option but to apply the waste levy for commercial waste, which is mandated by the Queensland Government. While the waste levy represents a cost to commercial operators, it is helping to achieve our community's long-term goal to reduce our environmental footprint through waste reduction and increased recycling of materials. Ultimately, the waste levy is helping to drive change in the way waste is perceived and encouraging businesses to take a more responsible approach, not only in their day-to-day operation, but also the longer term. And by the way, the waste levy is remitted to the state. It is not held by Council. Our Council grants programs continue to feature strongly in the 2022-23 budget to support individual and local organisations in helping to realise the shared vision of our community plan. The value we place in not-for-profit community-based organisations will help to make the Scenic Rim, I believe, the best place to live in Australia. This is reflected in our funding increase of 35% for community grants in the coming year. We've proposed a budget allocation for the community grants program to increase to $400,000 from $295,000 in the 2021-22 year, to meet increased demand, particularly by organisations whose ability to fundraise has been affected by COVID-19. Relying mainly on volunteers, these groups are the heart and soul of our towns and villages and well worth our support as their members continually go the extra mile to make a positive difference to community life. To help conserve and enhance the Scenic Rim's most valuable natural assets, we're proposing our environmental grants program to be boosted by 50%. The Scenic Rim is one of the most biodiverse areas in Australia, and maintaining habitat for this wide range of native plant and animal species is very much a partnership between Council and the community. We recognise the vital importance of ecological balance in supporting our key industries of agriculture and tourism, as well as preserving our environmental values. In addition to the Environmental Grants Program, Council's 2022-23 budget will also provide just over $80,000 for the Million Trees program, with the aim of planting 1 million native trees throughout the Scenic Rim by 2025. This program is well on the way to achieving its goal, with 667,277 trees having been planted as at 30th of June this year. We also encourage ratepayers to do their bit by using their free tree vouchers, which will be distributed with this month's rates notices, to plant native species. Once again, Scenic Rim community members will continue to have the opportunity to access free or heavily subsidised health and wellbeing activities through our continued investment proposed for $90,000 for our Be Healthy and Active program. Last year, this included 44 health and wellbeing activities delivered by 27 Scenic Rim businesses and community organisations. This All Ages, All Abilities program attracted more than 3,000 participants in the past year, with meditation, yoga and dance fitness proving particularly popular. Scenic Rim has experienced a number of disasters in recent years, and to enable reliable communications during similar events, we're investing in government wireless network hardware. The GWN, as it's known, covers approximately 99% of South East Queensland and brings agencies including the Queensland Police Service, Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, Queensland Ambulance Service and the SES into the same radio communications platform and frequency group. The purchase of 30 handheld radios, 30 single unit chargers and 2 fixed station terminals will enable coverage across the Scenic Rim region for council personnel, replacing antiquated radio systems and addressing issues of black spot coverage. As we continue to strive to provide a high level of customer service, our proposed investment of $70,000 in an online planning platform will pay dividends for council and the community through time and cost savings from early 2023. The current appetite for building and development across the region has seen a marked increase in the number of inquiries received by council about the planning scheme, and these will be streamlined by the introduction of the e-Plan project. This online platform will play a valuable role in the growth of our region as the Scenic Rim continues to power ahead with some 10,000 additional dwellings and essential infrastructure needed to meet the projected population growth between now and 2041. Councillors, these are just some of the highlights of our 2022-23 budget, which supports economic growth to drive regional prosperity and employment opportunities, building on our region's strong foundation for the future through the vibrancy and activation of our communities. Councillors, in closing, I thank you for your diligence and commend the 2022-2023 Scenic Rim Regional Council budget to you. And apologies for the marathon. We'll invite individual divisional councillors to share some words, but we'll have a moment of silencing the microphone so I can do the proper sterilisation process. Introduce Division 2 Councillor and Deputy Mayor, Jeff McConnell.
Thank you and good morning residents, Mr Mayor and fellow councillors. I'm not going to regurgitate the breakdown of the budget that has already been excellently outlined by the Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the Council on a fiscally responsible $103.2 million budget during these exceptionally challenging times, with not only COVID, supply issues and in the employment strain, but also the impact of weather that it's had on council assets over the last 12 months. The 4% rate rise is in accordance with our long-term financial forecast. All budgets are a challenge, where we are asking residents for a lump sum twice a year. This rate levy represents only 3% of the total taxes that a resident will pay throughout this year. When you consider income tax, GST and the fuel levies, this is minor. However, council budgets are the most scrutinised by residents. Council provides the most visible outcomes for the rates paid throughout the community. I fully support this budget and look forward to its implementation throughout the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We just work through our protocols. Thank you, Councillor McConnell. I introduce Division 3 Councillor Virginia West.
Right. Good morning to you all, and especially those who are joining us in the gallery here this morning, and to those residents who are listening online. I have a few comments that I'd like to share with the community this morning regarding the 22-2023 budget that we have before us today. All budget deliberations are challenging, and this year is certainly no exception, as we endeavour to balance Council's legislative requirements to maintain and replace public infrastructure, much of which is ageing in the Scenic Rim. And I do highlight our road network, which has suffered with the persistent rain events since the beginning of the year. We also need to balance the challenges of the ongoing economic recovery from the previous financial year and the expectations of a diverse and rapidly growing region. This budget continues to be guided by the long-term community vision contained in the Community Plan 2011 to 2026, which is underpinned by the corporate plan and the operational plan. Many residents will remember the extensive consultations in all our communities as the community plan was formulated to embrace their long-term visions and aspirations for the future of the Scenic Rim. The community plan was updated in 2018, and it is the collective voice of the community upon which strategic planning is based. In the many discussions leading up to this year's budget, Council continued to be mindful of our rapidly growing, diverse and widespread region, of our multiple, unique towns and villages, and the important principles of rates relativity, along with the legislative responsibilities that Council must adhere to. We need to continue to work collaboratively together, both community and Council, and to optimise the positive future that we do have before us. In closing this morning, I would just like to acknowledge the CEO and the executive team, the managers and all the officers for the many hours and input spent on preparing this budget. And I commend the budget this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor West. Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Division 4, Councillor Michael Enright. For those listening in, Councillor Enright's just wrestling with a couple of technology challenges as he was trying to go paperless. I think he's there now.
Good morning, Mayor, fellow councillors, CEO, General Managers, Council Officers and members of the public, both here and online. I value this opportunity to speak to the budget. As a councillor, I consider developing and supporting the budget is one of the most important duties I perform on behalf of our ratepayers, residents and businesses. And this year has taken 8.5 solid days of discussion since we commenced the process in December 2021. Unfortunately, the budget process is often only considered by many as merely the level of rates levied on our ratepayers. It is so much more than this. It is about the wide range of services provided to our communities, the provision of critical infrastructure, the maintenance of over $1 billion of council's assets, and how to best fund these services and infrastructure. As quoted many times in today's reports and policy documents, the underlying intent of this budget is to strengthen Council's financial position while delivering the capital works required to ensure that we can deliver the services provided to the community at an acceptable level well into the future. A key component to today's proposed budget is the Operational Plan 2022 to 2023. This document outlines the specific activities for the coming year to achieve Year 2 of our 5-year strategic direction as outlined in the corporate plan. I'd like to highlight some of the proposed projects in today's budget across a number of themes in the corporate plan. Spectacular scenery and healthy environment. The important work done by Council's biodiversity team in habitat protection, environmental education and building resilience through the development of disaster management plans. Sustainable and prosperous economy. Strengthening our region's economy will be achieved by engaging with local businesses and industry across the region, building capacity and resilience, developing partnerships for a stronger and more sustainable future, as we are doing with the Water for Worrell project, and a significant investment and commitment to our agricultural industry to fund the implementation of the Agribusiness and Agri-Tourism Industry Development Action Plan. Open and responsive government. Strengthening our community engagement and communication will be achieved through new and exciting ways to engage with our community through an expanded Let's Talk Scenic Rim platform, a new e-planning format improving access to the planning scheme, and customer request module improvements. Accessible and service region. The evolving waste management as we progress towards zero affordable waste to landfill. Healthy, engaged and resourceful communities. Over $150,000 increase in our community environmental grants, now totalling $550,000. Funding to continue the most successful hiking program. And perhaps the one that I am most proud of, Council's commitment to the development and implementation of the Scenic Rim Regional Council's Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan. These are just some of the hundreds of projects and programs that will be delivered by our dedicated council officers throughout the year. I would encourage all residents to read our operational plan. This is where you will see the amazing work done by council officers in so many areas. This budget also has many major infrastructure projects that will provide great benefits for our communities. A few come to mind. $750,000 to enhance sports ground lighting across the region. $250,000 for a trial alternative footpath material. And finally, the Hinchcliffe Bridge will be built at Coralbin to replace and provide greater flood immunity. $3.8 million well spent, I say. Certainly there are challenges. Challenges of dealing with the recovery following natural disaster, which sadly we have experienced all too often over recent years. Challenges that are attributed to growth in our region and the increasing expectations of our communities to provide more. However, I would much rather be dealing with the challenges of growth than the ever-declining spiral of a shrinking population and economy. This budget provides a roadmap to tackle these challenges as new opportunities, buoyed by recent data that our economy has grown despite the impacts of drought, bushfires, floods and pandemics, with our gross regional product increasing 4.45% to $1.95 billion. On the topic of strong financial results, I'm very pleased to see that this budget forecasts a modest surplus, which is now on the right trajectory to financial sustainability in the future. In closing, I would like to thank the Mayor for his leadership through this process and my fellow councillors for their perspectives and viewpoints. I would especially like to thank the CEO for his leadership and also recognise the combined efforts of his 4 general managers for their departmental expertise and their ability to provide the critical information to help inform our decision making. This has been a great demonstration of teamwork. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Enright. Just whilst we do the process of wiping down the mic, we'll prepare and I'll be able to shortly. I'll proceed now with introducing. You have to be here for the moment. Introduce Division 5 Councillor Marshall Chalk.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. Good morning, fellow councillors, CEO and staff, and a special good morning to all the residents listening at home. My talk today will be quite brief. I am supportive of this budget. I think it's quite responsible in the current financial climate. Around the table, we all hesitate to put the rates up. We know the impact on our residents. It's not something that we enjoy doing, but under the current climate, it needed to happen this year to balance our budget and keep the council moving forward in the right direction. I just want to call out 3 spending initiatives in this year's budget. The first one is the $750,000 investment in the sports lighting, sports funding for our region. And this is very close to my heart. I really wanted investment in this area. It goes really deep in our community to our children and grandchildren, and it'll be really proud of this one, and I really look forward to seeing how it progresses in our region and enhances our livability of our region. The second is a $70,000 investment for an officer to investigate more efficiency in our fleet resources. We spend a lot of money each year on our roads, and it's something that's really important for our region. And this investment will really delve into how we can best manage that fleet and find efficiencies to better manage our road network. So I really am looking forward to seeing the results that can be found in this area, and hopefully some great leaps forward in efficiency of this resource. And lastly, the $250,000 trial to alternative options for construction of our footpaths. We invest quite a lot each year already in footpaths, but as we all understand, we have a massive region, and it will take quite a long time to catch up and provide connectivity to for our residents in the region. So this investment will go a long way if we can find more effective ways to deliver this service for everybody. Finding more metres of footpath for less money, and give us the opportunity to take on more projects for things like cycle paths, footways and walking trails to connect all our residents to the centre of a town, or provide recreational loops and accesses. So I will be supporting this budget today. I think it's, as I said, very responsible in the current climate, and I'd just like to call out the council staff for their hard work. I think we've really challenged you this year as councillors around the table, which is what our job is, and I think you've responded really well to that. And we've come to a place where we have a really good budget moving forward for our region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Chalk, for those comments. Councillor McGuinness, we will turn to you. We won't ask you to come to the lectern here because it's a bit of a journey, but we will invite you in a moment to present your comments to this year's budget. Councillor McGuinness, we're in your hands.
Thanks, Matt, and you and the fellow. It's a good thing for the area. Overall, I believe it's a responsible budget that is heading in the right direction from a financial point of view. We've had a slight loss. We've budgeted the last 2 years. It's good to see that this is even though it's only a small profit coming through, it's headed in the right direction, and that's how it could be. It should be. We cannot keep doing at a loss. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to work that out. And I thank my fellow councillors and all staff once again for the effort that they've put into this budget, and let's hope it's appreciated by our residents.
Thank you, Councillor McGuinness. Now, in keeping with tradition, whilst I had that long speech on behalf of all, I would like to add some comments, and I will just briefly move to the microphone. firstly, councillors, thank you for all those comments, and certainly I'm greatly encouraged, and hopefully the community is, by the breadth of thinking. I did greatly appreciate that recognition, Councillor McConnell, the realisation that we continue to grow as the level of government so close to the community. We do come under the greatest scrutiny, but we have the most restricted resources of any level of government. We have limited capacity, and unfortunately our approach, our methodology that's required under legislation is to give people a consolidated bill rather than slide it through on every transaction that they take place with. And yes, at 3% of the taxes collected, we pull off miracles, I think, every year with what's possible as local government in general. Councillor West, I think that reminder of the strategic context that we always have to operate to, both our community aspiration in the community plan as well as our commitments in the corporate plan. Councillor Enright, those real impacts and the operational plan as well as our new initiatives really highlight our focus always at the table, councillors, has been about real impacts, both in process improvement as well as capacity improvement and performance improvement outcomes for our community's benefit. Councillor Chalk, I, like you, am excited by what's possible by improving the amenity of some of our sporting areas, by dealing with a couple of those difficult things for the volunteers to fund, and activating some of those spaces with upgrades of lighting, which allow people in this modern era where quite often they're not getting home from work till late. It allows the possibility for activation into the evening in some of our communities to a far greater level, which is both good for health outcomes. I was mildly amused that you're already contemplating grandchildren, but that's a sign of long-term strategic planning on your part. But certainly getting efficiencies out of the things we do is certainly something that we've been heavily focused on, and that initiative around fleet efficiencies, I'm excited that that will be the next step of what is a large area of expenditure. And like all of you, the notion around footpaths, I think when I first stepped to this chamber of conversation, the spending at the time and the projection was a 75-year forward plan of what was known as the footpath needs then. We've invested quite significantly over recent years. We've reduced that down to a magnificent 38 years, which is still nowhere near where we want to be. So the notion of trying to find some different ways to bridge those gaps and bring that opportunity forward for the safety, particularly of many in our community, to not be walking on the side of roads is a goal that we all share, and I'm excited by that trial. And Councillor McGuinness, certainly I agree with you. Whilst we don't do it in public, these were robust deliberations. They always are, but I was delighted both with the robustness of the preparation of officers from the zero-based budgeting approach, but also the engagement, thought and discipline of the councillors in this robust process, both to challenge the prioritisations, but to also bring forward additional activations that we believed needed better consideration and more priority and consideration. I too am delighted that this year we will identify in the budget with a small surplus, which is essential for us to continue to live up to the expectations of the state with the metrics they place upon us. We're in a fortunate position. Our strong financial performance has been confirmed again by the QAO's most recent report. That's the Queensland Audit Office. And we're far better placed than a large number of other councils in Queensland. And that doesn't come about by thinking small, nor does it come about by underinvesting. It does come about by robust dialogue in the chamber, robust planning, good strategy, commitment to execution, and accountability throughout the organisation to that regard. And we are supported by an organisation that continues to deliver strong improvement and strong efficiencies. We're often defined by the moments where our service doesn't meet a standard rather than by the majority of the time that we go unnoticed and our teams go unnoticed in the efforts they do. And I pause this morning to congratulate the CEO and the leadership team and their officers for the preparation of the budget, but also to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible efforts under extreme duress, in particularly in operational areas following our disasters that continue to repeat, that the teams find a way to get it done. And yes, it's a long haul to come back, and everyone's concerned about the pothole in front of their gate. But in actual fact, there are kilometres upon kilometres that get repaired and are continuing to be maintained on a prioritised basis. And I just thank them for that offer, that commitment. That commitment for reconstruction will take us a long time to work through. But I am delighted that we've shown the courage in this year's budget to step out. Whilst we've constrained some of our recurring areas, we've stepped out with some of those initiatives to try to change the game for some of our communities, such as the lighting and the footpaths. Again, it's a delight to be part of this chamber and to step up to these challenges. There will never be easy times in this chamber, councillors, I hate to tell you. There will be no such thing as easy times, but there will be great times for our community if we stay committed to the task as we have done this year. Thank you. I will invite councillors, invite the CEO, John Gibbons, to share a few words on behalf of the operational organisation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for your comments this morning. Good morning, Mayor Christensen, Deputy Mayor McConnell, councillors, executive leadership team, officers, members of the media in the gallery this morning, and members of the public listening in at home. This year's budget is my fifth for the Scenic Room Regional Council and is the result of an extensive process, as we've heard this morning. I'd like to thank the elected council for their dedication to the budget process and our wonderful employees who have contributed to the development of the budget and to the 2022-2023 operational plan. This budget delivers real value for the more than 44,000 people who live in our community and for the many thousands of others who visit and do business in our region. It reflects Council's ongoing commitment to provide better services, customer outcomes and responsible management. It carefully balances the need to ensure financial sustainability for the future while delivering efficient, modern facilities for our customers today. It also reflects the culture of continuous improvement and resilience we are building despite the unprecedented challenges we have experienced this year, from natural disasters and flooding to the ongoing pressures on our workforce and supply chains caused by COVID-19. As our population grows and demand for services increases, we are under pressure to meet the needs and expectations of our ratepayers and to achieve more with resources that have not grown at the same rate as demand. Scenic Room Regional Council is responsible for almost $1 billion worth of vital public infrastructure. Our communities depend on these assets, many of which have been hard hit by unprecedented weather events over the past 12 months. Our infrastructure is extensive. It stretches across a vast area of more than 4,200 square kilometres and includes 967 kilometres of sealed roads, 793 kilometres of unsealed roads, 243 major culverts, 261 floodways, 130 vehicle bridges, 15 pedestrian bridges, and 80 kilometres of pathways. In addition, Council is responsible for 220 buildings, 43 playgrounds, 4 libraries, 4 swimming pools, 66 public toilets and 129 parks, reserves and camping grounds, covering 426 hectares. We couldn't do this without our team of 446 dedicated field and office-based full-time, part-time and casual employees, whose hours equate to approximately 410 full-time equivalent positions. Our employees have continued to not only meet but to exceed expectations placed upon them in the face of higher than normal impacts affecting all industries, including increased vacancies across our organisation, absenteeism as a result of COVID, and the personal impacts of natural disasters on them and their families. Here at Council, we have a team of truly committed individuals, and for that, the executive leadership team of Caroline McMahon, Deborah Howe, Chris Gray, Oliver Pring and I are extremely grateful. This year, the rate increases in the Scenic Rim have been kept to one of the lowest increases of any local government in South East Queensland announced to date. This has been achieved through Council's diligent management of operating costs. This same diligence enables us to maintain and renew our existing infrastructure and to deliver a raft of new initiatives while limiting rate increases. We know our customers want better online services and tools, faster turnaround and more transparency, and this budget responds. It includes funds for a new online platform to streamline town planning inquiries, new hardware for more reliable communications in a disaster, and a significant boost in funding for community grants and environmental programs, to name just a few. These new initiatives will be delivered by our existing employees who are committed to providing better customer outcomes and improved services while managing increased costs. The challenge has been even tougher this year. The Scenic Rim Regional Council's dedicated team provides a huge range of services to the Scenic Rim community. Over the last 10 to 12 years, our population has increased by more than 6,000 people, but the numbers within our workforce have not kept pace with that rate of growth. Instead, we have found ways to be more efficient, to deliver more with the same, and we continue to put the customer at the heart of everything we do. Developing Council's annual budget is a team effort. Every item is carefully planned and scrutinised from a zero base, not based on how much has been spent in the past, but based on what is needed to deliver the key level of service that our community expects. It's then up to the Mayor and our councillors to act in the best interests of the whole of the Scenic Rim region, not just their own division, to determine the right balance between the standards of service we want to deliver and the cost to ratepayers. Finding the cost balance can be a difficult call. Each year, Council produces a 10-year capital program as part of the Community Budget Report to show the community where capital projects are being planned across the region. These strategic planning processes ensure we are looking ahead and making provision for the major infrastructure we will need for our growing community in the future. This year we have budgeted $34 million for capital works, including roads, bridges, drainage, footpaths, waste management, council facilities, fleet and our Vibrant and Active Towns and Villages program. Supporting local businesses continues to be a priority, and the value of Council's local procurement is growing. Small business makes up more than 98.5% of the region's businesses and are critical for a sustainable local economy and local jobs. Council also continues to benchmark its financial performance, and we're proud to have achieved another positive result in the Queensland Auditor-General's report on local government for 2021, as has been mentioned, with Scenic Rim Regional Council being rated as a council with a lower risk of concerns about financial sustainability based on current income, expenses, asset investment and debt financing policies. This is great news for the Scenic Rim Regional Council. It compares very favourably to other Queensland local governments and those local governments that Council is often compared with across the South East Queensland region, and is testament to Council's prudent long-term strategic approach. As our tourism industry expands, the value of our natural resources is also under the spotlight. The Scenic Rim is one of the most biodiverse areas in Australia, and a 50% increase in Council's environmental grants program in this budget will strengthen the community initiatives that help maintain our stunning landscape and native flora and fauna habitat. As a council, we are privileged to partner with our local residents, businesses, community groups and visitors, and to work with them to continue building a bright and prosperous future for our award-winning region. Thank you.
Thank you. councillors, we now turn to the business of the meeting before us today, and we have, as you'll recall, we brought these matters forward from confidential. So I move to the first item for our consideration, was item 6.1. And now that the confidential agenda is released into public viewing, that commences on page 3 of 232 in that consolidated document. And I will ask the General Manager, Council Sustainability, to introduce this for us. Thank you. Oh, we've got a screen down. Just, again, the technical challenges, it's, yeah, we'll ask Councillor Enright to help with those. No, I think we've solved it. Okay, over to you, GM.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The agenda today has 18 items pertaining to the 2022-2023 budget. Prior to commencing that, I'd really like to, from a staff perspective, reiterate some of those comments that the budget process has been a very rigorous process with some very good debate around, and at the heart of the best interests of the community for the region going forward and into the future. It certainly was a long process, but certainly worth the robust discussions at the end. What I'll read, good morning to the Mayor Councils and gallery, and also the public that's listening on the live stream. What I'll read, Mr Mayor, I'll just read some introductions about the budget in general, and this will apply to the items and give some context to it. In accordance with sections 169 and 170 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council must adopt its budget for the financial year after 31 May in the year before the financial year, but before 1 August in the financial year. Section 169 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 states Council's budget position for each financial year must be prepared on an accrual basis and must include statements for the financial year for which it is prepared and for the next 2 financial years. The statements are to be included are the financial position, the cash flow, income and expenditure, and changes in equity. The budget must also include a long-term financial forecast, a revenue statement, and a revenue policy. The income and expenditure statement must state rates and utility charges, contributions, fees and charges, interest, grants, subsidies, depreciation, finance costs, net results, the estimated cost of significant business activities, activities of a commercial business action units, and significant business activities. The budget must also include the relevant measures of financial sustainability for the financial year and the next 9 financial years. These include asset sustainability ratio, net financial liabilities ratio, and operating surplus ratio. The budget must also include the total value of change expressed as a percentage of rates and utility charges, and must be consistent with the corporate and operational plans. Now, the next 18 items, Mr Mayor, are in line with that sort of context, and we'll go straight into the agenda proper, which is item 16.1, which is the revenue policy. 6.1, sorry. This is just a legislative requirement to Council to prepare a revenue policy. The revenue policy is a statement that outlines the strategic policy position of Council in relation to revenue measures to be adopted in the budget. The policy has been reviewed. There are no changes from the previous years, and it also has the added extra external review provided for it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, GM. Any questions for the GM, councillors? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, if I could just ask the CO on page 6 under the policy statement, it talks about equity. Defined as ensuring the fair and consistent application of lawful rating and charging principles without bias. When they talk about without bias, what are we talking about there?
on behalf of I'm happy to respond to that, Councillor McConnell. Without bias means obviously one of the principles of rating is the capacity of the land to earn, not the owner or not the the nature of the business owning the land in particular. With close to 19,000 individual assessments within the rateable assessments within the Scenic Rim. It's a very kind of complex process in trying to maintain that equitable, but at all times, no such discussions elaborate on the owners or the benefactors or owners of those particular lands. But they're grouped as part of the categories that they fall under.
So we rely on the land
just put button down.
Sorry, we rely on the land valuations primarily, not the wealth of the person owning the land.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So just to elaborate on that, because it's an issue to the whole, if I'm interpreting the words right, that you've provided a response to the question, the focus is around the valuation of the land, the capacity of the land given its different categorisations, but never on the capacity of the owner, never a consideration about the capacity to pay. Is that a correct characterisation?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I seek a mover. Councillor McConnell. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Not, I seek a seconder. Councillor West. Wish to speak further, Councillor McConnell?
Just to reiterate on my question to the CEO about equity, it's really hard where residents live in a high value area but have a low income and have lived there for so long. So we must ensure that we follow the policy statement and without bias, and sometimes it is unfortunate for some residents who struggle to have a asset rich but a cash restricted financial situation. So there is without bias when we make the rates, and I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Then, councillors, we've a motion before us to adopt the recommendation that pursuant to sections 169(2)(c) and 193 of the Local Government Regulations 2012, Council adopt the revenue policy which will replace the version adopted on 24th of June 2021 and as provided in attachment 1. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
Yes, agreed.
That's unanimous, thank you. We move to page 9 of the what was the confidential agenda for those following along. Again, GM, we're in your hands to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, councillors, fellow executives, and to those listening in the gallery. It's my pleasure today to present the Operational Plan 2022-2023 for your consideration. As you are aware, Section 104 of the Local Government Act requires a local government to develop and implement an operational plan as part of its financial management system. As already stated earlier by Councillor Enright and others, the Operational Plan 2022-2023 reflects the commitment for implementation of Year 2 of Council's Corporate Plan Scenic Rim 2026. It's the culmination of efforts by officers across the organisation over the last 8 months to articulate the broad range of activities planned for the coming financial year, together with key milestones and performance indicators against which we will measure our success. Councillors, I'll take this opportunity to again commend officers involved in the development of the new operational plan. It's a well-considered plan which, together with the ongoing delivery of services to the community and our 10-year capital plan, demonstrates our recognition of and ongoing commitment to delivery against the 7 community themes as expressed in the community plan. Spectacular scenery and healthy environment, sustainable and prosperous economy, open and responsive government, relaxed living and rural lifestyle, vibrant and active towns and villages, accessible and serviced region, healthy, engaged and resourceful communities. We report against the Operational Plan 2022-2023 on a quarterly basis as required by legislation. Councillors, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councillors, I'm in your hands. Any questions for the GM? Councillor McCollum?
Would the GM be able to go through each of those sections and give us one key spend in each of those?
I can do so. Haven't previously prepared for that question, Councillor, but I'm aware that Councillor Enright certainly identified a number of certainly valuable actions contained within the plan. Councillors, I draw your attention to the first item in spectacular scenery and healthy environment, which is around delivery of Council's ongoing biodiversity strategy, the Scenic Rim Regional Council Biodiversity Strategy 2015 to 2026. This item will ensure that Council continues to deliver actions identified within the 5-year implementation plan, 2020 to 2025, and continue to deliver programs aligned with that Council's biodiversity vision. That item has an indicative annual budget, excluding employee expenses and overheads, of $190,000 in the financial year. Moving on to the next corporate theme, sustainable and prosperous economy. I can identify that particularly of interest to local business, an item which is largely driven internally by officers and therefore has an indicative annual budget without employee costs and overheads, is an item, an action, support the local economy through the development of strategic partnerships and supply chain management. So this item is really about continuing to engage local business in exploring opportunities for increasing local economic spend. It also captures a significant project of Council's around the Shop Scenic Rim Fixed Loop gift card program. It's a program of which our economic development team is extremely proud, and one which will benefit a range of local businesses, both through local and tourism spend alike. Moving into the following theme of open and responsive government, and I believe that Councillor Enright did touch on this one also, but that was to improve systems in the digital capacity to enable enhanced customer access to Council services. So there are a number of activities that we are planning in the financial year with a budget of $70,000 in materials and services to significantly enhance our customers' access to our services online. One of those is around publishing the Scenic Rim Planning Scheme 2020 in an e-planning format to enhance the user experience, and also to assist with self-servicing of town planning inquiries. The other activity that's highlighted in the operational plan along those lines is to create the digital capability with on our online platforms to facilitate customer interactions online for a range of Council services. So those services which are often used by our customers, we are aiming for them to be able to lodge online and have outcomes generated as a result of that process. It's a continuous improvement cycle, but one which we're very excited about. The next community theme is relaxed living and rural lifestyles. You know, one of the items that was notably adopted by Council in the last ordinary meeting of Council is the Scenic Rim Smart Region Strategy 2022 to 2025. Council has the 22-23 budget includes an item in that budget with an indicative annual budget of $25,000 to be spent in the coming financial year, implementing actions for year one of that Smart Region Strategy. I'd encourage listeners to access that strategy at Council's website and have a look through it. It truly is innovative and inspiring in terms of actions planned for the coming year, and indeed the 3 years of the strategy. Under the community theme, Vibrant and Active Towns and Villages, a range of initiatives are spent, but I think probably of significant note is in engaging with the community to define the unique character, values and sense of place of the region's towns and villages. Significant annual budget there of $200,000, but that's really around developing domain and open space infrastructure in key identified towns within the region to define that unique character. We have a 10-year capital Vibrant and Active Towns and Villages and strategic projects plan that will be delivered over the indeed the 10-year capital plan, but also a range of other revitalisation projects incorporating community input into public art to celebrate those local stories. So certainly another significant project for delivery in 2022-2023. Moving on to the community theme, accessible and serviced region. I guess of significant note is the intended progression of Council's full catalogue of services, which we hope to progress to its completion in the coming financial year. That catalogue of services will be available to the community to understand the range of services that Council offers, our commitment to service delivery standards, and also the cost to serve associated with each of those services. So this has been a project that's been years in the making, a lot of effort by Council officers to develop that. And in fact, that's a catalogue of services that we intend to develop using in-house resources, and therefore the operational plan indicates a zero indicative annual budget, not including employee expenses and overheads. Again, another big win, I think, for community and residents. The final community theme, healthy, engaged and resourceful communities. I know Councillor Enright is significantly proud of the action to develop and implement the Scenic Rim Reconciliation Action Plan. And just to reiterate that, that project, certainly for that Innovate plan is a plan for the Scenic Rim Regional Council as opposed to a plan for the region. So just to be very clear, it's Council's own reconciliation action plan developed under the Innovate banner. Council is committing $20,700 to this initiative in the coming financial year, and we hope to have that action plan documented and adopted by the end of the calendar year, at the end of December, with commencement of the delivery of Year 1 actions well underway in the remainder of the financial year.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, happy with those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I'll just leave pause in case Councillor McInnes needed to introduce the recommendation, please.
Thanks, Council. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Recommendation for item 6.2 of today's agenda is that, pursuant to Section 104 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Section 174 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the Operational Plan 2022-2023 as tabled and included in Attachment 1 to this report. And 2, Council require quarterly updates from the Chief Executive Officer regarding the implementation of the Operational Plan for the 2022-2023 financial year.
Councillors, I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Further questions? Further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor West. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor, and I thank the General Manager for running through a brief summary, and really that is just a tip of the iceberg, really. There are so many things that we do in this operational plan that really supports what it is that our purpose is in the community, and I commend from the CEOs through the General Managers through to our officers through Council that deliver on this operational plan. I would encourage all of our residents to have a look at it, just to get an understanding of the fantastic work that is delivered by our amazing officers, and I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, just really following on from Councillor Enright's comments, I just want to mention that we have really tried very hard to make this a very readable document for the community. So I too would urge our residents to take a look at it, and certainly to look forward to the to look out for the quarterly reports, which are also we've refined to make them very readable and as interesting as possible documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? Wish to close, Councillor Enright? We put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McInnes? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. We move to item 6.3, which is commences on page 60 of this consolidated report, and we turn back to you, GM Council Sustainability.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 6.3 is seeking consideration for the differential rating categories for 2022-2023. As spelled out in the report, another legislative requirements requiring Council to set out the rating categories of the rateable land in the local government area. And just following up on the query beforehand from Councillor McConnell, this proposed differential rating structure has been developed to ensure equity and fairness, and it does aim to provide similar rate revenue base for Council to maintain existing facilities and necessary services, and allow land valuations to take into account the inherent differences in income earning potentials of the differing lands in our government area. Upon review as part of the budget process, there were no identification of any new categories required or amending or requiring amendment, and as well, out of abundance of care, the wording in some of these categories was sent for external review to ensure that they met legislative requirements and intent of Council in setting those different categories. Happy to take any additional queries, should that be.
Thank you for that introduction, GM. Councillors, any questions? if not, we ask you to introduce. I won't ask you to read all of the categories, but noting the table of all the categories, if you introduce the recommendation, please.
And that's one point I forgot to miss out. There's 63 individual categories, which hasn't changed from previous years. So the recommendation, that being, is that pursuant to Section 81 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 for making and levying differential rates for the year ending 30th of June, that should be 2023, Council resolve the rating categories of the rateable land in the local government area and a description of each of the rating categories be as follows.
And as follows, for clarity, is a table of all of those categories that identifies the descriptors for each of the categories in full. Councillors, seek a mover. Councillor West. Any further questions for the GM? Councillor McConnell?
Probably to the GM, we've got 63 rating categories. What percentage would the residential, as in 1 and 9, provide our overall rates?
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. I'm just quickly trying to bring that up on the page now. It's roughly about 79, 80%, with the rest made up of commercial, rural, and all those other different activities. But a fair proportion is residential at this stage.
So we rely heavily compared to Gold Coast Logan, where they would be about what percentage?
Probably opposite to what we are. So that, yeah, those obviously that's the luxuries that they have with the big business and the other commercial activities, that they're able to compensate some of those council expenses on them rather than forwarding all those to the residential ratepayers.
Thank you for those clarifications. Any further questions? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor Enright. Wish to speak further, Councillor West?
Just very quickly, just to mention, look, there's a wide range of various varying different categories there, and obviously, as has been mentioned, they have stayed the same from the previous financial year.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is an equally important part of our rating strategy. We've mentioned earlier about valuations, but land uses and applications that come under this rating category is also an additional important aspect in determining the ultimate rating for that property. So a very important part of our strategies and working under the legislation that we are able to operate under. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to seek leave to speak additionally? If not, Councillor West, do you wish to close?
No, thank you.
Okay, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McInnes? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 6.4, page 71 of this agenda. And again, we turn to you, CEO.
Sorry, me, Mr. Mayor. 6.4 is a delegation of power to apply rating categories. Another legislative requirement to be able to delegate the delegation from council to the CEO in order to categorise the particular parcels of lands to the necessary categories that they fit under. It's an annual process that requires the delegation to be provided, and this report seeks consideration from council to grant that delegation to the CEO.
Thank you for that introduction. Any questions, councillors? If not, I ask you to introduce the recommendation, please, GM.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that, one, pursuant to Section 257 of the Local Government Act 2009, Council delegate to the Chief Executive Officer its powers under Section 81 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to identify the differential rating category in which each parcel of rateable land in the Council's local government area is included by using relevant information from the Council's land record and other information which identifies the use of the rateable land. And two, in accordance with Section 257(1)(b) of the Local Government Act 2009, Council delegate to the Chief Executive Officer the power under Section 81(4) of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to undertake an inspection and determination of primary use subsequent to an inspection should there be some doubt about primary use of the property.
Seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move to page 74, item 6.5. GM, we're back with you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following those two other items, consideration is now sought for the setting of the differential general rates 2022-2023. This consideration applies the rate in the dollar for each category, as well as the minimum general rates set for each particular category. It also particulars the previously mentioned capping impacts, and in particular for the residential being set at 9% and some other properties there being set at 12%. The capping 12.5%. The capping allows a maximum increase applicable to any particular assessments as compared to the previous year that they experience, in particular with the volatility of the revaluations that we've seen unfold. Again, the rate in the dollar and the minimums and particular cappings are spelt out for the 63 individual categories.
Thank you. Questions, councillors, for clarification to the report? Fair bit of detail there. Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just ask if the General Manager could confirm that what the capping applies to.
Thank you, Councillor Enright. The capping applies to the general rate increase from the previous year.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll ask you to introduce the recommendation, again noting there's a very extensive table there in the middle of it, and we'll ask you to reference without reading through each of those line items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, this document is available publicly, so it's there for the listeners to view. The recommendation is that, one, pursuant with Section 94(2) of the Local Government Act 2009 and Section 77 and 116 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, and having resolved to decide different rating categories, each a rating category, for rateable land in Council's local government area under Section 81 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council resolved that general rates as differential general rates as a rate of the dollar for each rating category, and to set minimum rates and limitation on increase of rates from that levied in the previous financial year, cap on increase, as follows, and then includes the individual rate in the dollars minimums and cappings for the 63 categories.
And you've got another
and item 2, Council resolved to levy rates by a single rate in the dollar for each category with a set minimum for each rating category.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillor McConnell. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Councillor McConnell, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else seeking leave to speak? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 6.6 on page 82.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This item seeks consideration around separate rates and charges. In line with previous years, and as already mentioned, the separate rate and charge being proposed for the 2022-2023 budget is associated with the community infrastructure charge, and that's spelled out in the reward. It provides the details as to what the purpose of the charge is for, namely the prioritising of funding to go towards the costs associated with council's extensive road and bridge infrastructure maintenance, as well as that the forecasted revenue from this charge is expected to be about around the $9.6 million. This represents around 17.58% of the total general rate and community infrastructure charge revenue of $54.6 million. Happy to.
Questions for the GM councillors? Councillor Enright?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wonder if the General Manager could just outline the strategy that we've been using over the last few years to increase the community infrastructure charge and the benefit that it has on the general rate.
There has been a strategy to parlay an increase of that prioritised funding towards the community infrastructure charge, and it served a additional purpose that assists in mitigating the volatility of the revaluations in reducing the overall general rate component, which is fixed, which is directly correlated to the valuation of an individual parcel, whereas a community infrastructure charge is a fixed rate applied to every assessment. So there has been the added strategy to mitigate the volatility of the revaluations by increasing the general the community infrastructure charge, noting that to fund the rest of the funds required for the roads and maintenance budget, which the Mayor indicated before, there will still be a contribution from the general rate towards that. However, this allows the community infrastructure charge allows the prioritisation of some of those dollars, as well as having the additional bonus of mitigating some of the volatility of the revaluations.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? If not, I ask the GM to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation is that, pursuant to Section 94 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Section 103 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council resolved to levy a separate charge, community infrastructure charge, for the 22-23 financial year, as set out in the revenue statement contained in the annual budget 22-23 document.
Councillors, I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any further questions? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor West. Wish to speak? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would. I think this is a strategy that has worked well. We're well aware of the fluctuations in valuations around the regions over recent years and the impact that it has when it's not consistent across the region. We've experienced areas in the east of the region a couple of years ago who had sharp rises, and then the following year areas in the west. So by this deliberate strategy to increase the community infrastructure charge reduces the impact on the rateable values and the rate in the dollar, and it lessens those sharp peaks that have originated from the valuation rises. So I think it's been a deliberate and a successful strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? I would just briefly speak additionally and, yes, support the motion. And note that what we have done in our language around this for transparency, we talk about the combined, when I was using examples earlier about minimums, I talk about the combined general rate and community infrastructure charge, so that there's transparency about what that combined amount will look like. That'll be different for each valuation once you move beyond the minimum. In fact, there'll be some people this year, because of the variability of what's happened in valuations, there are some people who'll see a reduction in their rates this year, and there will be some people who find themselves relying on the cap. That's the nature of the variability that we're required to in the rating structure, as opposed to what we can offset through this separate charge. I commend the motion. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
Yes, Mayor. In favour.
Thank you. That's unanimously supported. We move to item 6.7, page 85. Councillors, again, GM, we're with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.1 seeks consideration for council in adopting the overall plan. 6.7, sorry, for the overall plan for the Boonah Rural Fire Brigade. Some background, it's contained in the report, but for the listeners out there, council is required to adopt an overall plan before, at the same time, a local government resolves to levy the special rate and charge. Now, this is a special rate and charge, and it's being levied on behalf of the rural fire brigades for to fund the operations of the rural fire brigade, and applied to identified rateable land within the Boonah Rural Fire Brigade area. The charge for this financial year has gone up to $33, and it does represent 87.85% of the estimated overall plan for the Boonah Rural Fire Brigade. And the process has involved consultation by the South Coast area of the Rural Fire Service with the respective brigades. Also note that 100% of the funds levied by council are remitted to the Rural Fire Brigades.
Thank you for that introduction. Questions? Councillor McConnell?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think the word group has been left off some of the wording here. The group is made up of brigades, so that the Boonah Rural Fire Brigade group incorporates numerous brigades. So, yeah.
We may just have to amend the wording in that, in the recommendation.
Yep.
It doesn't change the overall scope or delivery of the intent.
So, and just for the newcomers to the region, this isn't a levy for us. We collect it on behalf of the state, is that correct?
No, this is what we levied on behalf of the groups and remit to the groups.
On
Not
behalf
to the
of the
state.
We don't control the fire brigades?
That's right, yeah, I think on behalf of yes.
I think if I may, I think Councillor McConnell has two parts to the question. Firstly, we don't create the plan. The plan is provided to us by Rural Fire under the auspices of Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And the funds collected, as I think Councillor McConnell was trying to clarify, whilst we are the collection agency, those funds are then remitted via QFES through a proper process for the application to the designated area for those brigades.
That's correct. I probably just want to separate against the emergency services levy. Yeah. That's separate.
That's why I thought it was better to try to, because we'll get to that one. Okay, any further questions for the GM, noting that'll be an amendment to the recommendation to add clarity?
Yes,
Councillor McGuinness?
Yeah.
Yep.
At the discussions taken place with the Boona Brigade on these charges?
Are you able to assist? Councillor
I
West
can
looks
answer
like she's
that.
able to assist.
Councillor McInnes. Last Monday, the Local Area Finance Committee met here at Council. I guess it was probably getting a little late, I have to say, but the Boona group were present, as were the 2 members of the Boona group and 2 members of the Beaudesert group. And the officer, Corey Bock, spoke about the plans for this year, and he did talk about the shortfalls that there have been up until now. So we all have copies. Corey came and spoke to us all, so we all have a copy of their budgets.
Does that suffice as clarification, Councillor McInnes?
Not really, Mayor. I did speak to different ones in the Boona brigades, and they weren't aware of this happening, and I'm not just sure of this meeting that Councillor West is talking about, just who was involved, but anyway, that's the fire brigade believe they need this much, which I think from $12 to $33 is a significant increase, and I don't think our residents like waste. I'm not suggesting that this is wasteful, but to move in such a direction, so steep a direction, will be reflected upon by many people in the area, I think.
Councillor West, could you clarify?
Yes,
You've talked about who was there, who represented, which might help.
Yes, the group captain, Councillor McInnes, the group captain for Boona Fire Brigade was there. Do you want his name?
Trevor?
It was Trevor Turner, and there was the secretary was there as well, Crystal, and then the equivalent from the Beaudesert group were there as well, and Corey Bock from QFIS chaired the meeting.
So, Councillor, noting those communications that may not have happened to some of the member groups, we can give that feedback to QFIS about managing that process, but it's a step away from, I think, noting your comments. We have a plan from QFIS that they've put forward, not one that Council has created, is my understanding, so therefore we are acting in accordance with that process. Noting your comments, that might be a follow-up that we can feed back to QFIS for their consideration. Any further queries? If not, Councillor West.
Comment, Mayor,
yes, you can add a comment.
Yeah. Look, I believe in the past these local area finance committee meetings were always held well in advance of preparing the budget, and for whatever reasons this year it didn't happen, but I really believe that into the future we need to be working with QFIS and having these meetings very, very early on in the piece. If possible, please.
Thank you. GM, I'll get you to introduce the recommendation in full, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation is that pursuant to Section 94 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Section 94(3) and 4 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the following overall plan for the Boona Rural Fire Group in the Scenic Rim region. Overall.
So just keep
Boona
Rural Fire Brigade Group. We just keep the wording clear.
Overall plan for the Boona Rural Fire Brigade Group in the Scenic Rim region. Description of service, facility or activity. The activity which Council is to carry out the contribution of funds to the RFB, which provides fire prevention and firefighting services within its service area under the Fire and Emergency Service Act 1990, located within the Scenic Rim Regional Council area. Rateable land to which a special charge applies. The rateable land to which a special charge applies is identified in Attachment 1, that land being which will receive a special benefit from the provision of the activity because the activity funds the provision of the rural fire service to the land and for which a rural fire service would not otherwise be available. Special charge 2022-2023.
So I'm just going to ask you to go back and reread. I think there's a couple of words there that were missed in that reading. So just for precision, if I just ask you to reread that section before you proceed, please.
The rateable land to which a special charge applies. The rateable land to which a special charge applies is identified in attachment 1. That land being which will receive a special...
Being land.
That land.
Being land.
That land being land.
Yes.
That land being land which will receive a special benefit from the provision of the activity because the activity funds the provision of a rural fire service to the land and for which a rural fire service would not otherwise be available.
Thank you. Press on.
Special charge for 2022-2023. The special charge for the 2022-2023 for rateable land contained within the Boona Rural Fire Brigade Group benefited area is $33. Estimated cost of carrying out the overall plan. The estimated cost of carrying out the overall plan is $127,001 with a contribution of $111,573 to be raised through the special charge. Estimated time for carrying out the overall plan. The estimated time for carrying out the overall plan is 1 year, commencing on 1 July 2022.
Thank you, GM. It's quite wordy, and you've got another one coming up, so catch your breath. I seek a mover. Councillor West. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor West, do you wish to speak further?
Thank you, Mayor. Really just to say, look, I totally understand this is quite a large leap in funding, but I do also believe it's important that we have consistency throughout our region with the two Rural Fire Brigade groups, and this will bring them both into alignment.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
Against, Mayor.
Okay. Then the motion is carried. I will note a division that those in favour, Mayor, Divisions 2, 3, 4 and 5, and against Division 6. We move to page 92 of the agenda, and this refers to back to you, 6.8, GM.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This, similar with the other previous item, now relates to the overall plan for the Bow Desert Rural Fire Brigade Group. The report is detailed. The charge is $33. Has been no change from previous year. The expected revenue from this charge represents around 88.1% of the estimated overall plan for the group, which it's a forecast of the estimated expenditure of $144,802. Similarly, consultation to Council has been provided by the South Coast area of the Rural Fire Service, and 100% of the funds are remitted to the Rural Fire Brigade groups.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions for the GM? Any additional comment? If not, GM, I'll get you to draw breath and introduce this recommendation in full also.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for this item is that pursuant to Section 94 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Sections 94(3) and 4 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the following overall plan for the Bow Desert Rural Fire Brigade Group in a Scenic Rim region. Overall plan for the Bow Desert Rural Fire Brigade Group in the Scenic Rim region. Description of service facility or activity. The activity which council is to carry out is the contribution of funds to the Rural Fire RFB, which provides fire prevention and firefighting services.
So I think that'll be updated to
RFBG, which provides fire prevention and firefighting services within its service area under the Fire and Emergency Services Act 1990, located within the Scenic Regional Council area. Rateable land to which the special charge applies. The rateable land to which the special charge applies is identified in Attachment 1, being land which will receive a special benefit from the provision of the activity because the activity funds the provision of a rural fire service to the land and for which a rural fire service would not otherwise be available. Special charge for 2022-2023. The special charge for the 2022-2023 for rateable land contained within the Bow Desert RFBG benefited area is $33. Estimated cost of carrying out the overall plan. The estimated cost of carrying out the overall plan is $144,802, with a contribution of $127,578 to be raised through the special charge. Estimated time for carrying out the overall plan. The estimated time for carrying out the overall plan is 1 year, commencing on 1 July 2022.
Well done, GM. The Seeker mover, Councillor Enright, thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Councillor McConnell?
I think it should be noted, if you just go back up to just up a little bit if you could, in the recommendation, it talks there about providing fire prevention and firefighting services, and I think we'll find that the Rural Fire Brigade do a lot more than just firefighting. They attend traffic accidents, they assist the SES during floods, they come out and help sometimes with the search and rescue of lost and injured hikers, so they do a lot more than just fire prevention, so they're a lot more than just a firefighter, so I think it should be acknowledged.
Thank you for those observations, Councillor. I think the addition I would, I guess, suggest is that's just a further piece of feedback for them about clarifying what is the service that they're asking for this funding for into the future. If they would like to see that they're properly recognising the breadth of services that their people provide as opposed to the description they currently provide. Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor West, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yep, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Enright, sorry. Councillor West was waving over here for me. I got distracted for a moment. My apologies. Okay. Councillor Enright, I do recognise the difference.
Thank you. Look, I think it's...
I've got the mover, just the seconder.
Seconder, Councillor McConnell.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I think this is, while noting there's no increase from the previous year, I think it's an opportunity to recognise the fantastic work that our rural fire brigades across the region do, and mostly by volunteers. And I think that's the important part, is that they do, and as Councillor McConnell rightly outlined, it's more than just fighting fires in our rural areas, and they're a great support to many of our other emergency services groups around the region, and I'm sure that our rural providers would be more than happy to support this ongoing activity and support through our region.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McInnes? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I have been pushing back a break, but we still have a fair way to go, and I wouldn't like us to rush that. So we will pause just for a brief break, councillors, for 15 minutes, please, or thereabouts. It's 11, just after 11, but we'll return at 11:15 to continue the deliberations of the budget today. For those in the gallery, please take a short break. For those on the digital gallery, we shall return shortly to continue this meeting. Thank you. We're back on. Welcome back, councillors. Welcome back to those joining us in the gallery and also in the digital gallery, and welcome back to the executive team. We continue with the special meeting at item 6.9, page 99.
Can we just do a roll call to make sure Councillor McGuinness is
Councillor McGuinness. Councillor McGuinness, are you? Just apologies to those outside on the digital. We're just trying to ensure we've got our Councillor McGuinness rejoining. Yep, he's back now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Righto. Please, if you continue, GM, Council of Sustainability, introduce item 6.9, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 6.9 seeks consideration around the waste utility charges for 2022-2023. As touched on earlier today about the speeches, this report seeks consideration in setting the charges for the associated activities for the collection and operation and maintenance of Council's waste disposal services. It would be noted that, and touched on earlier, that they have increased, and this is largely due to reflect the increasing operational cost of providing these services. Outside of that, Mr Mayor, happy to take any further queries.
Councillors, any questions for the GM on this report? Any additional comments? If not, I'll ask the GM to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation is that 1, pursuant to Section 94 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Sections 99 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt to make and levy waste management utility charges for the supply of waste management services for the 2022-2023 financial year as per the rates contained in this report and provided for in Attachment 1. And 2, in accordance with Local Law Number 5, Waste Management 2018, Council resolved to designate all premises within Scenic Room Regional Council boundaries as areas in which Council may conduct general waste collection. Services shall be provided to all premises within the Council area where waste services are or can be made available.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillors, Councillor McConnell. Any further questions for the GM? Any additional discussion, councillors? I would just add a piece of discussion that the area of waste, whilst we're noting the charges before us for the current arrangements, when you look at the operational plan for this year, you really highlight there's significant work going around our strategic positioning in waste management and the satisfying the state expectation over the next 10 years to move to a zero avoidable waste to landfill goal, and the continued work in that regard from a strategic point of view, which sits beside this ongoing delivery of current services and thinking about how to move to that changed future and dealing with the costs accordingly. Any further discussion? Not, we seek a seconder. Councillor Enright, wish to speak? Councillor McConnell?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 6.10, page 106. Again, GM.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 6.10 is the consideration in adopting the rates discount policy as per legislative requirements. This policy provides officers guidance as to how council would consider applications for granting of the early payment discounts when payment is made outside of the allocated discount period.
Councillors, is there any questions to the report? Points for clarification? Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just ask if the General Manager could confirm the percentage at which the discount applies.
Sorry, Councillor Enright, that will be later. This is just a policy where granting of that rates discount, if they make it within the designated timeframes. The actual percentage itself is contained in a later part of the agenda item in the administration of rates and charges.
In a separate agenda item, Councillor.
Yeah.
I'll I'll hold that question to another occasion.
So this is a procedural. Okay. So any further clarifications to item 6.10? If not, introduce the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that pursuant to section 130 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the 2022-2023 rates discount policy as provided in attachment 1, which will replace the version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Seeker mover. Councillor Enright. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seeker seconder. Councillor Chalk. Wish to speak? Councillor Enright?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Anyone seeking leave to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Not we put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. We move to item 6.11, page 114.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.11 is the rates category changes policy seeking consideration for adoption from Council today. The policy generally just provides the mechanisms and ability for Council to review and adjust to generate categorisation of a property following the changes in categorisation or ownership is required in legislation, so that enables it. Otherwise, the property doesn't get changed from either occupied or principal place. It just allows us the administrative ability to change that should circumstances change to the property.
Thank you. Any clarifications you wish to ask, councillors? If not, I'll ask you to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that pursuant to Part 5, Division 4, Sections 81 and 89 to 93 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the rate category changes policy as provided in Attachment 1, which will replace the previous version dated 24 June 2021.
Seeker mover. Councillor West. Any further questions, councillors? Any additional discussion? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, wish to speak? Councillor West?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I believe that brings us to item 6.12 on page 120.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item relates to seeking consideration to adopt the listed concession to rates and charges. This item sets out concessions that can be provided to a variety of groups and is a legislative requirement. In order to allow those concessions, Council must resolve to adopt those concessions being applied.
Thank you, GM. Councillors, any clarifications to this report? Councillor McConnell.
Yeah, if I could just get clarification from the GM. Not-for-profit organisations. We have several in the region that, although they're not-for-profit, they are substantially financially well off, I will say. So they're not small, what we think of not-for-profit organisations. So how do we look at that? Do we look at those different compared to some of the smaller ones, or is it because they're not-for-profit, it's there's no bias put on it, and we treat them all the same?
That's correct, and you'll see the next item, one after this, which is 6.14, which is a rates-based financial assistance policy, which spells out the particulars around the considerations of those, and I guess an application provided to council will be assessed based on those merits assigned to what's the provisions in those. So there is no bias. There's no discretion from officers or like. It's spelt out clearly in the policy. What are the eligibility criteria?
Thank you.
Any further clarifications, councillors? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wonder if the General Manager might be able to outline the other entities that are applicable under the concessions to the rates and charges.
Yes. Yes, so and I'll spell those out in the recommendation shortly. There'll be the not-for-profit organisations, the voluntary conservation covenant approved landholders, specific land use, and TPI card holders.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further clarifications, councillors? If not, GM, take a deep breath. I'll get you to introduce this recommendation again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that 1. Council resolve, in accordance with sections 120 and 122 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, upon application, Council will grant eligible ratepayers full rebate of the general rate, separate charge and waste disposal utility charge to the following classes: not-for-profit organisations, not-for-profit community service providers, sporting organisations operating on council-owned or controlled lands. 2. Council resolve, in accordance with sections 121C and 122 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, upon application, Council will grant eligible ratepayers full rebate of the general rate, separate charge and waste disposal utility charge to the following classes: dip and pump sites held separately from the balance of holdings or held separately by trustees, land identified as historic subdivisions under the Boona Shire Planning Scheme, effective 31st of March 2006. 3. Council resolve, in accordance with sections 121A and 122 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, upon application, Council will grant eligible ratepayers a rebate of whichever is a less of $200 per annum and 20% of the gross rates and charges levied to the eligible classes of ratepayers: property owned and occupied by totally and permanently incapacitated TPI veterans holding a valid TPI card. 4. Council resolve, in accordance with sections 121E and 122(1)B of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council will grant a partial rebate of the general rate to landowners who have entered into a voluntary conservation covenant registered under Section 97A of the Land Title Act 1994 with Council, or an unregistered voluntary conservation agreement with Council to preserve, restore or maintain an area of environmental or scientific significance upon their rateable land, namely vegetation communities having levels of significant detail below. The rebate will be a pro rata percentage of the general rate attributed to the conservation area of the land.
Councillors, I seek a mover. Councillor McConnell. Any further questions for the GM? Any additional discussion? I think I'll ask Councillor Chalk to not request it be reread, but maybe follow on the screen. The GM's doing well in working his way through this. So we have a mover. We have no further discussion. Seek a seconder. Councillor Enright. Wish to speak, Councillor McConnell?
Only to say I think it's important that we do provide concessions to our rates and charges for those in the community, especially the not-for-profit, who a lot of them are community organisations, volunteer-run, as well as our TPI veterans and those who have a conservation covenant on their property. So I fully endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
Favour.
That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I believe that brings us to item 6.13, page 124. Before you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item seeks consideration for the adoption of the financial hardship policy. This policy provides council with the ability to consider, upon applications, and apply concessions on rates and charges for the relief due to financial hardship encountered by the ratepayer.
Thank you. Questions for the GM on this item? If not, we'll introduce the recommendation, which is a much shorter form this time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that, pursuant to sections 119 and 120 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the financial hardship policy as provided in Attachment 1, which will replace the previous version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Firstly, councillors. Councillor Enright. Any additional questions, clarifications to this? Any additional discussion, councillors? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor West. Wish to speak, Councillor Enright?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I think I believe it's important to have this financial hardship policy to provide a bit of a safeguard for those who are in a difficult situation. We've certainly experienced those over the last few years, and it's important to have both this facility available but the structure around it to ensure that those who are impacted can rely on this policy to assist them through a difficult time.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McInnes? Carried unanimously. We move to item 6.14 on page 131. Councillors, GM once again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With Council having resolved to provide the concessions, consideration is now sought to adopt the rates-based financial assistance policy. The policy sets out the parameters for rates-based financial assistance for those not-for-profit groups, voluntary conservation covenants, specific land use, and TPI card holders.
Thank you. Councillors, you have the report before you. Are your points for clarification? Any additional comments? If not, we'll ask the GM to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Sir. The recommendation for item 6.14 is that pursuant to sections 119 and 120 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the 2022-2023 rates-based financial assistance policy as provided in Attachment 1, which will replace the previous version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Seek a mover. Councillor Enright once again. Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Any discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk, thank you. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. That takes us to item 6.15 on page 139 of the agenda document.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is seeking the consideration of Council around how it's the administration of the rates and charges are facilitated. The administration seeks the consideration around how notices are issued. On this, what's been proposed is the rates notice continue to be issued biannually. It also seeks the due date maintaining the same, being 31 days after the issue of the rates notice. It also provides the legislative inclusion around levying of interest on overdue rates and charges, and where the upper parameter is set by it's contained with legislation. So council has no say around that in terms of setting the maximum rate that's allowable on charging overdue rates and charges. And also what was referred to before, the early payment discount of 5% is being sought to continue this year as well. Just some notes on that. Including pensioner remissions, there's around $1.86 million is actually granted, or around 3.4% of the total general rates and community infrastructure revenue. It's afforded as part of discounts and pensioner remissions. And for this year, what's contained in legislation, the upper limits in terms of the interest rate being applied to overdue rates and charges is the 8.17%.
Thank you. GM, questions, councillors? I think Councillor Enright, that question about the percentage of discount is contained in here. Is there anything additional?
No, the General Manager was very diligent in his providing information. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any additional clarifications? If not, I'll ask the General Manager to take another deep breath and present this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that Council resolve to administer its system of rates and charges by 1. Levying rates and charges in the Scenic Rim region in accordance with Section 104 of the Local Government Regulation by the issuance of rate notices biannually. 2. Ensuring that pursuant to Section 118 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, require rates and charges to be paid within 31 days after a rate notice for the rates and charges is issued, due date for payment. 3. Ensuring that pursuant to Section 133 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, levying interest on rates and charges that are not paid by the due date for payment stated in a rate notice at the rate of 8.17% per annum calculated on a monthly rest and as compounding interest. 4. Pursuant to Section 130 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, allowing a discount for the payment of general rates on or before the relevant due date for payment of 5% of the rates otherwise payable, only applicable if all charges on the account are paid. And 5, adopting the recovery of overdue rates and charges procedure as provided in Attachment 1, which will replace the previous version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Thank you. Councillors, firstly seek a mover. Councillor West. Any additional questions, councillors? Any additional discussion? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor West, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McKinnon? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 6.16 on page 148. Councillors?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 6.16 seeks consideration for the adoption of the investment policy. The investment policy 2022-2023 outlines Council's investment objectives and overall risk philosophy and procedures for achieving the goals related to investment. This sets the parameters around how and where Council can invest its funds when they're not at being required, so that we're maximising any potential revenue on those time unused funds.
Thank you, GM. Any questions for clarification to the GM? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, if I could, just under the policy statement on page 151, the following principles were applied to all investment decisions, investing only in investments permitted by the current legislation. Could you give us an outline on what those are?
Yes, the legislation is clear in the way where Council can invest its funds. This was in line to make sure that the institutions where Council invests or place these funds under investure are rated accordingly under the banking standards, so that there's a minimum requirement that they have to be. And this really was as a result of a number of years ago where a lot of councils, especially in New South Wales, invested their funds in volatile markets seeking high gains, but ultimately there was huge losses, which necessitated this mechanism to ensure that Council invested its funds in those institutions where they were effectively cashed back by the government, so that if Council did lose its funds, there was an ability for those funds to be reinstated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further clarifications, councillors? Not, I'll ask the GM to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation is that Council, pursuant to Section 191 of the Local Government Regulation, adopt the 2022-2023 investment policy as provided for in Attachment 1, which will replace the previous version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillor West. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor West, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Move to item 6.17, page 159. Again, GM, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is now seeking consideration for the debt policy 2022-2023. The debt policy is required in nature to state any new borrowings planned for the current financial year, which is the 2022-2023, and also forecasts out the next 9 financial years and the period over which the local government plans to repay existing loans and new borrowings. As part of the budget deliberations, what's been proposed for new borrowings for the 2022-2023 financial year, as contained in the policy, is for $2 million for partial funding of the 2022-2023 Capital Works program, which is around $34 million, as previously stated, and also the partial funding of the strategic land purchase on Long Road on Tambury Mountain, which equates to about $3.075 million. It should be noted, council only seeks to borrow loan borrowings to only fund capital programs and not to fund operational aspects of the council operations.
Thank you. Councillors, questions for clarification? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, to the GM, if we could just go through the new borrowings on page 165, attachment 1.
Yes. For the new borrowings for 2022-2023, as mentioned before, there's $2 million indicated to borrow to help partially fund the Capital Works program. That's intended to be borrowed over 6 years. Also, for this financial year was the $3.075 million for the property purchase on the 122 to 128 Long Road, Tambury Mountain, as part of Council's strategic land purchase, and that's intended to be borrowed over a 2-year period. There's also planned borrowings for 2020 financial years 2024, 2025 and 2029. Should be noted that they're still proposed and only contained in the long-term financial forecast, and they're subject to timing and applicable change. Did you want those read out as well?
No, that's okay. Just in relation to the property purchase at 122, 128 Long Road, just confirming that is for the car parking for Gallery Walk.
That is correct. That certainly is a proposed site for car parking.
So, sorry, is there anything further to add, GM? No. Thanks for that clarification.
Could I just further to that last question? I note the repayment period of 2 years, which is relatively short for that. I wonder if you could outline the reason for that strategic move.
I'd have to, and I'm trying to cast my eye back on the resolution when that council provided to the purchase of the land, and I'm looking, Chris, he's got a better memory than me.
Yes, the idea on this, the purchase was to actually understand that the council's need is not for the entire portion of the block, and that we would certainly be looking at, within that 2-year time frame, selling a portion of that block, and with the potential to recoup the funding that we've actually sought as a loan.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, GM. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for item 6.17 is that, pursuant with section 192 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the 2022-2023 debt policy as provided in attachment 1, which will replace the previous version adopted on 24 June 2021.
Seeker mover. Councillor Chalk. Any other questions, councillors?
I'll just ask the
Councillor
GM again. We always do it every year, but why do we borrow long term for capital works?
I guess it's just to supplement the program, as I previously spelled out. The program itself is about $34 million for this financial year, for the 2022-2023 financial year. There's a need to supplement some of that funding of that delivery, but also in these the period of volatility, and especially with the financial markets, we don't have a clear crystal ball gaze yet, but there could be fluctuations with pricing for materials and services and the like. And I guess borrowing a little bit of funding towards capital is providing some mitigation of risks associated with that, in that the interest rates are still considered historically low, and we will should should there be continuing fluctuations in the financial markets with prices continuing to skyrocket, then there's a shielding around council's ability to carry out those works, given that we've got some, not necessarily surplus cash, but an ability to fund some of those changes.
Mr Mayor, would you be able to elaborate some more on your long-term strategic?
I was going to save it for discussion, but perhaps I'll do it anyway. I think the GM's properly answered through the lens of the proper financial fiduciary mindset, but certainly the other considerations, councillors, that I think it's worth acknowledging. We look at a range of these things that have long-term assets that will have long-term benefit for future communities, and particularly where the quantum is significant, borrowing so that future communities who will benefit from it are sharing the burden of paying for it, as opposed to the community today carrying all of that expense, is certainly one of those strategic considerations that we take in our deliberations that are best, because if we, certainly for some of the big things around the place, if we had to wait till we could, inverted commas, save the money from today's community, you'd defer the commencement of receiving the benefit, but also then you would still have the community today bearing the cost. Whereas I think we've had regular discussion that there's a balance point here. Some of these facilities rightfully should be funded by the community of tomorrow, who will benefit as much, if not more, from some of the developments in the pipeline.
Thank you.
Any further clarifications? Any further discussion, councillors? I would just add to that last comment that, you know, in borrowing for things is not a foreign concept that we all, I think for me the parallel example is very few people are able to save the full cost to buy their first home, and they borrow against the opportunity today that they will pay for tomorrow, and in some regards that's what we're attempting to do, is to try to bring the benefit early and share the burden of paying for it with the future community that gets to share that, which I think is fiscally responsible and more equitable than some of the other approaches. Any other discussion, councillors? If not, we seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor Chalk, wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It has already been said by and well put by you, Mayor, so I'll just add that I think we did a good thing. More interest rates were really low to extend our debt a little bit in a responsible manner, and we benefit now from a long period of low interest, and we can bring projects forward for those communities in the future. And also just to say that, you know, we are planning a 10-year period, but we do cast our minds a little bit beyond that in our planning, so we do look out that distance to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and I think we are at present, so thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? And wishing to speak additionally? I would just speak additionally and echo, confirm, support Councillor Chalk's perspective. Whilst we have to operate within a particular window of time frame for detail thinking, certainly every asset that we put in place generally has a 20-year life cycle as its basis. So being able to think to that stage and beyond to ensure that we're getting the right sizing in the things we do is also an important part of our consideration, to be properly efficient for the long term for the community. And it's welcome that we're seeing that discussion that we're having on many of these assets. Anyone else speak? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor McGuinness?
Favour.
That's carried unanimously. Councillors, we move to item 618 on page 167. And GM, we're once more in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The last item for consideration today, seeking the consideration of the budget proper. As detailed at the very start, the legislation spells out the requirements in order for council to consider a budget, the requirements that have to be put forward, considered and resolved. 6.18 now provides the balance of those items, namely being the estimated financial position as of 30th of June 2022, which sort of provides the framework for forecasting of the 2022-23 budget. It also provides the statutory financial statements, namely being statements of comprehensive income, the statement of financial position, statement of cash flow, statement of changes in equity and measures of financial sustainability for the financial years 2022 to 23, 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025, being the 2022-2023 year and 2 years. As well as the previously mentioned around the long-term financial forecast, which gives us the 10-year window to try and mitigate any aspects around the financial operations of council. It also provides in detail the revenue statement, which outlines all the individual categories, the administrations of the rates and charges, as well as the inclusions of the rates and utility charges as well. And lastly but not least, provides the mechanism in the way council applies the Code of Competitive Conduct for the 2022-2023 financial years for its business activities. Open for any queries?
Questions, councillors, any clarifications? Councillor
I will. If you have a look at page 204 in relation to our budgeted financial statement, and it shows the budget for 2022-23. In some of the commentary, there's been a budget of $104 million. Where does that show up?
That's called the headline budget. So what you add through is the operating budget as well as the capital, but taking away the loan activities and other aspects.
And this budget doesn't include some of the grants that we will receive in the future. So it could be more than 104.
That's correct. Obviously, when the documents were being put together, we were getting notifications of those items, but they were. We had to set a point in time to set these statements to be as at that point. Any of those new grants and other aspects that have come in since these budgets have been put together will then be reflected in the carry forward budget and relevant revisions of the budgets.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any further questions, councillor Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. Question to the General Manager about the operating result, noting my pleasure of a positive return in the forecast for the budget.
Yes, very modest. Councillor Wright, a 0.3% representation, which is better than the negative, I suppose, in the light of things. It does, and as stipulated before, take into account our financial forecasts. It does pave well for those, for those future considerations.
Thank you. Further clarifications, councillors? If not, GM, take one more very deep breath and introduce the recommendation for us, please.
Okay, so this is a long one. The recommendation, Mr. Mayor and councillors, is that 1, pursuant to section 205 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, council note the statement of financial operations and financial position of the council in respect of the previous financial year, the statement of estimated financial position, be received and its contents noted for the period ended 30 June 2022. And 2, pursuant to Section 107A of the Local Government Act 2009 and Sections 169 and 170 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the following financial statements for the financial years 2022 to 2023, 2023 to 2024, and 2024 to 2025, being A, Statement of Comprehensive Income, B, Statement of Financial Position, C, Statement of Cash Flows, D, Statement of Changes in Equity, and E, Measures of Financial Sustainability. 3, pursuant to Sections 169 and 171 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the Long-Term Financial Forecast 2022 to 2023 to 2031 to 2032 as tabled. 4, pursuant to Sections 169(2) and 172 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the Revenue Statement 2022 and 2023 as tabled. And 5, pursuant to Section 47 of the Local Government Act 2009 and Chapter 3, Part 2, Division 5 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council endorsed to apply the Code of Competitive Conduct for the 2022-2023 financial year to the following business activities, being roads, building certifying, waste collection, with the business activity definitions being for roads. This business activity operates as an external competitive contractor for roads maintenance and construction. This business activity excludes normal ownership of the roads, nominal ownership of the roads assets. Building certifying. This business activity involves building certification services provided to external customers. It excludes regulatory aspects of the function. Waste collection. This business activity comprises all aspects of the provision and charging for refuse collection and its disposal, including management of the refuse collection contract. Estimated activity statements. 2022 to 2023 full cost pricing budgets for each business activity are included in the estimated activity statements included with the budgeted financial statements.
Thank you. Councillors, I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Now, further clarifications?
Mayor,
Councillor
if I
Enright.
could just ask the General Manager to outline the Code of Competitive Conduct.
The Code of Competitive just applies that council is competitive in nature and that we're not setting rates that would diminish where there's opportunities for other businesses to participate in activity. Otherwise, we're anti-competitive.
Thank you.
Any further clarifications, councillors? Any further discussion? Not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor Enright, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. This is, I guess, the sole purpose of our meeting today is to ensure that these financial statements as listed are what we as a council have agreed upon through our budget discussions. As I've alluded to previously, I'm very pleased that we have moved toward a modest surplus, and I believe this is something that we need to continue to be financially sustainable into the future. Importantly, this budget outlines many new initiatives, many extensive capital budget infrastructure projects, and it really reinforces what we as a council are here to do in building better communities throughout our region. I commend this budget. I thank all of council officers involved in bringing this together, and thank my fellow councillors for our consideration in developing this over the last 6 to 7 months for us to progress forward into the next year.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, I will speak additionally and concur with Councillor Enright's comments there. It's a long process, which we usually start in September, October, but it's basically throughout the year. You're always thinking of the budget and where it's going to go next year. And I do think this one is fiscally responsible. We have a modest surplus, and I think the operational plan, 10-year capital works plan, all align with our community plan and what the community expect. I think some of the initiatives that have come out of this year will enable the open and transparent look at our service level providing our service level agreements. So I concur and endorse this budget.
Thank you. Councillors, anyone else wishing to speak additionally? Councillor Chalk?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I agree with both councillors' statements so far. I think it is quite responsible. It's good to see a modest surplus in the budget this year, and I'm also encouraged by investment in trying to find more efficiencies in with the organisation, which is something we need to always be looking at as well. So I think in whole, it's a good budget. You'll take this community forward with some good projects that will really hit home with the community. So I endorse this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, anyone else? Councillor West?
Thank you very much. Look, apart from my initial speech, I am also believe this is certainly, it's a budget about a sustainable financial future for our region, and certainly a lot of work has gone into this, preparing this, and we're looking forward to the future.
Thank you. Any further? If not, we'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Great.
It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for your efforts today. Thank you, officers, particularly to the CEO and executive for the work. Also to the team who laboured very diligently into the weekend to try to consolidate the community budget report so that it was available today. And certainly commend to those listening that will be available digitally. To share some of that, the more detail, as well as some of the press releases out of today. But thank you, councillors. We have had a number of challenges, even just to be able to complete our processes with the distractions of staff absences due to COVID, as well as disruptions with disaster events, and also the significant challenges that we're facing in the year ahead, both as council as well as across our community. I'm delighted we've been able to work our way through the process today. I trust also that the community have heard that there has been rich thought in this process by both the officers and councillors to arrive at where we are today. And with that, I will close today's special meeting at 12:09. My clock just clicked over to, and I'll bid you good day. And thank you to those in the digital gallery for joining us. Thank you to those in the gallery for joining us. And councillors, officers, meeting closed.